Fire Emblem Fates Birthright was the first Fire Emblem game I've played, but I've actually never beaten it in Lunatic. I have beaten Conquest on Lunatic before though, so to mix things up, I replaced my entire army with just Corrin. That's right, I'm doing a Corrinquest Birthright run, a run that has my entire army consisting of user-submitted Corrins. Before we start though, if you want to see runs like this or catch me streaming, feel free to like, sub, and hit that bell so you know when it all comes out. To start, we need a Corrin to lead our Corrin army. So, I created Kui. Much like the last Corrin I made from the Rev Corrinquest, this is a Magic Luck Boonbane Corrin with the Samurai talent, giving me access to many important skills such as Duelist Blows, plus 30 Avo, Sword Fair for the extra plus 5 damage when using a sword, Vantage if I'm feeling confident in my enemy phase, and of course, Astra will help increase my guard gauge, which in a run that has increasingly harder hitting enemies, it'll be incredibly essential for the later maps. I decided on the magic boon to get a head start on Corrins' Dragonstone damage. Corrins' strength growth regardless will be perfectly solid anyway, and while I cannot really gain the 11 sword easily, I am able to make up for the potential lower strength with the Noble Yato, which grants strength and speed plus 2 while in my inventory, and the extra boost in strength Hoshido's Noble's promotion class change can give me. While this path I don't think is going to be as strong as the Rev run, I did feel as though I should keep this consistent across runs for familiarity's sake. Chapter 7 begins with the Corrins having to defend Fort Virginia. Wait a minute. Defend Fort Virginia? But to do that, I can't go alone. The first Corrin that was submitted was Niesna by Niesna, who is a Troubadour with a Magic Defense Boonbane and the Renewal skill. Having a Troubadour Corrin to start with is huge, as this would most likely be my only staff unit for this run. The second Corrin chosen was Fisha from Fisha, a Paladin pre-promote Corrin with a Defense Speed Boonbane and the Shelter skill. The original intent was that we wanted this Corrin to fall off at around the mid-game, so we only gave him access to 10 total levels to work with. More on him later. The third chosen was Coco, totally not the VTuber, submitted by previous run's GOAT Just a Weeb, an HP Luck Boonbane Wyvern Rider with the Miracle skill. Having a flyer, especially a fairly durable one this early in a game like Birthright, is going to be incredibly helpful, especially once we get into the later maps. Next was Kaito from ISP, an archer with a Strength Res Boonbane and the Darting Blow skill. With how hard hitting archers are in this game, combined with a skill like Darting Blow, I have no doubt Kaito would be a hard hitter. Last selected was Lalo, submitted by The Waifu War, an Oni Savage Corrin with a Skill Strength Boonbane and the Jontium skill. This is actually a somewhat interesting Corrin, since the para bonuses Oni Savage in general is really strong, even with only base para-ups, and having the Jontium skill only helps that Lalo is going to be a great support unit. We begin the map with us rushing to plug the left choke point and activate the Dragon Vein so we can heal. It was at this time I realized that many of our Corrins were potentially, just maybe, a bit overpowered relative to the enemies for this chapter especially. We slowly inch forward and realize we may have gone an inch too far because we killed the Outlaw, meaning we can no longer have access to the only Armor Slayer in the game, as none of my Corrins at this point have Lock Touch. With Coco capturing Silas, dragging him, Sakura, Hana, and Tsubaki to join the permanent bench, we end Chapter 7 in 12 turns. Chapter 8 starts with us climbing the Eternal Stairway. We immediately make a 5-minute stairway joke, angering Yago, a reoccurring villain in all 3 routes, to fool our vision into attacking innocent Wind Tribe soldiers, forcing us to have to explain ourselves to Ridemaster Fuga in an all-out brawl against his entire tribe. We start by stealing all of our bench units' weapons, starting with giving Fisha the only javelin in the game, slowly realizing we just made more of an Oife than a Jagan. As the deployment count increased dramatically, we had Kui put in our credit card info into Fire Emblem heroes, making more room for Corrins, such as Rasha, a Cavalier with a Strength Speed Boonbane and the personal skill of Lancefair, giving her immediate extra damage output and strong long-term growth with how well Lancefair pairs with other skills Cavs get over time. The second Corrin was Cassie, by, of course, Cassie. This Corrin was an outlaw, with the Speed Luck Boonbane and the Replicate skill. Replicate allows its user to duplicate themselves once per map, with the duplicate and the original sharing HP, stats, inventory, etc. Whatever happens to this Corrin will affect the duplicate, and vice versa. This is typically a fairly late game skill, and having something like this early on will 100% be incredibly useful. Next was Chris, created by Bongeforged Chris, a Speedluck Boonbane Dark Mage with Ren Heaven, which allows the user to deal half the foe's strength or magic as bonus damage. And due to its high proc chance because of it being activated based on 1.5 times the skill stat, it's practically free extra damage that feels far more reliable than other proc skills to activate. Saul from Justin was next, another Dark Mage with a Magic Defense Boonbane and a personal skill of Luna. So now we have 2 Mage Corrins with proc-based personal skills. This does mean I will choose for them to not be in the same class when they promote just for variety's sake. And lastly, Chungi submitted by Storm, a Spear Fighter with the Speedluck Boonbane and a personal skill of Heartseeker, giving us a similar support Corrin to Lalo, as Heartseeker could potentially give us better hit chances in the future. This chapter was the start of what my Corrins were lacking in the most: speed. Even with decent magic or strength, many of my Corrins just could not handle units on their own, as they could not outspeed them. So I utilized dual strikes along with pair-ups to maximize damage. But because all of the Corrins I received outside of Kui and Fisha are level 10, that does mean they are slightly over-leveled, so they actually receive fairly lower EXP than I think I would prefer, not to mention occasional misses that really hurt. Corrins like Coco and Cassie though fare the best, as Coco's flight made traversal much easier, along with Cassie's replicate giving her 2 outlets to gain EXP, which helped them a lot to grow for this chapter. That aside, we steal Hanoka's Guard Naginata plus extra bench warmers and continue forward, reaching and defeating Fuga. Originally, the plan was to use Fisha to chip down Fuga and give Kui the kill for EXP. However, Fisha said no and proceeded to hit a 5% crit on Fuga, ending this chapter in 15 turns. In chapter 9, we decided to take a quick break at Izana Spa. However, this was instead a trap from Zola, a reoccurring character in every route to pop all the Corrins by means of keeping us entrapped in a boxed room and turning on the microwave. It was at this point I realized we were actually 1 Corrin short, but we found an unpopped Corrin kernel. Popping it, we found Brugirl, submitted by Happy Basilisk, a fighter Corrin with a speed skill Boonbane with Certain Blow. Immediately, having a skill Bane Corrin's downsides get immediately negated thanks to Certain Blow's extra plus 40 hit is one thing, but it's another when you realize that it also makes skills such as Gamble, a crit increasing skill at the cost of hit, become more viable, had me realizing that this Corrin might have the potential to be the best Corrin in this team if we invest in her correctly. With that said, the hardest part of this chapter is the first few turns, as while we can plug a choke point, we will also be surrounded by many Toon Range units. And because many of my Corrins have fairly low HP, this led me to huddling all of them up as close as possible with pair-up and reducing as many attacks from the enemy as possible before we can escape the microwave. And with us having Lalo backpacking a Javelin Fisha to handle as many enemies outside as possible, we managed to get by and escape the microwave. Having escaped our Colonel prison, we grab Oboro and Hinata to the bench position and proceed to wreak havoc, gaining as much EXP as possible with Rasha and Brugel together especially being the MVPs. This was when something blossomed, and chat and I realized that these 2 Corrins may be perfect for each other in more ways than one. We dubbed the Bruh Sisters. Once we gained all the EXP we could realistically squeeze out of this chapter, we reach Zola, chip him down with Fisha, and bring the Corn Popper prisoner with a Chris and Fisha dual strike, spreading the EXP out, ending the chapter in 19 turns. In chapter 10, we decided to keep Zola around because, yeah, I don't know. Whose idea was this? Corrin? Yeah. Which one? The Corrins argued which one made this call before being attacked by the Mokushu tribe, realizing we have reached Birthright's Ninja Hell. This map is not really fun, because especially at this time of the game, you won't have too many units to handle the abuse of the ninjas early on. However, what they didn't account for was that I had Fisha with a Brugirl pair-up strength boosted javelin, one-shotting most ninjas in the vicinity. Sometime in the middle, we encountered a lost drunk pineapple wandering around, so we had Cassie call on our resident Uber driver Azura to help bring him home. We then recreate a chapter of Fire Emblem, the Sacred Stones, with Fisha handling most of the map and the other Corrins getting the scraps. got the rescue staff, and killed Kotaro with Fisha, ending this map in 16 turns. In Chapter 11, we decided it was time to take a boat, and like any Fire Emblem game, no boat ride is a free ride, as we immediately get bombarded by flyers in every direction. Because of the fact that I do allow units that show up for the chapters to be able to get used, I decided to yoink Reina before she got comfy in her bench to commit a massacre, as she proceeded to destroy every flyer in the map at the bottom, while Fisha handled most of the flyers at the top. Any flyer that manages to get through though gets handled by Kaito and Cassie, obliterating anyone who may stand in their way, with Coco also matching damage thresholds to get a few kills in as well. Because of the fact that many of the flyers had a single rest stat, this gave Corrins like Salt and Chris easy kills, eventually leading us to be able to get through this boat map, with Brogil killing the last enemy, learning Gamble the process, all in 17 turns. In Chapter 12, we reached Circensia and realized we had a unique opportunity for us to defeat Garen immediately, by having Azura dance to give him the discomfort debuff, allowing us to strike him while he is vulnerable. However, we were ratted out by Zola, who then gets killed by Garen because evil. Because I wanted to play a different map, I decided to bail and escape this map with Coco, ending this chapter in 3 turns. Which, after we learned that Azura apparently takes recoil damage from using her pendant's magic, we immediately transition into Chapter 13, where a terrifying monster named Camilla shows up, and despite the fact that she makes me absolute bank on Etsy, she is still the enemy, so I must set aside my desire to make more money and strike my business partner down. We were one Corrin too short, so we decided to grab a Corrin from the Simple Ant named Depressed, a magic boon strength Bane ninja with Darting Blow. I couldn't tell he is depressed. Initially, the chapter goes smoothly, with Fisha scouting out, handling a lot of the enemies. I also handed Chungi the guard Naganata for now, as her high speed stat but somewhat middling defense made it so that she could take enough hits for the other Corrins to be able to finish it out. Fisha and Rasha, who is paired up with Bird Girl, tread around javelins with incredible success. Things go smoothly, until Camilla low-tier gods Cassie. But because nobody would attack her afterwards, it was an empty threat. We proceed to grab every house, squeezing the town dry of its rewards, defeating Selena with Cassie, giving Fisha access to the practice katana, which gives +5 speed, and yeah, you can see where that would go. Depressed also became shockingly useful as, despite being a dagger unit, his damage output was still fairly high to chip away at armor knights, and with crit rates added on top of that, made him incredibly helpful. Between the two Dark Mages at the moment, Chris was a bit stronger with Saul, slowly falling behind due to his lower magic stat, which became concerning as a lot of Corrins outside of a select few were starting to slowly fall behind as Fisha took so much EXP. Of course, we managed to defeat Camilla with Rasha paired up with Brugirl, contributing to the Bruh Sisters hype train. Like, seriously, these two became the reason people tune into these streams. With Kui defeating the last Armor Knight in this chapter, we finished this map in 16 turns. After deciding to spare my business partner, and recruiting our favorite Lobster Lord and Scarlet, who only lives in this route, to our retirement bench. I proceeded to then pre-promote Lalo to help increase his para backpack stats, as in general, it was unlikely to see him as a combo unit, but his pair-up and Gentium skill was still incredibly useful, maintaining his good support usage. We also early promoted Niesna, since she grabbed her level 15 skills by now, into a strategist, continuing to be my goat in support. It was at this time we also added the second to last Corrin for this run, Lizard, submitted by Actual Lizard, an outlaw with the HP Strength Boonbane with 2 personal skills, that being Golem Bane and Malefic Aura. However, due to me already having an outlaw and practically 3 bow units, I decided to make him a dread fighter instead, so that he becomes a mage slayer with 1 to 2 range. Chapter 14 begins with us attacking Nor's border, with me immediately sending Fisha, like we're playing FE8 once again, to the top left corner, handling most of the Cavaliers. Despite this, we have to handle the bottom right side of the map, which has a lot of enemies with high stats, with none of our Corrins even being able to leave a dent into one of the paladins even after a debuff from Lizard. However, this was the period where the Bruh Sisters really pulled through, with Brugirl paired with Rasha landing a crit, barely killing with 32 damage against a 31 HP paladin. What a goat! We were able to get through the first cluster with Coco and a crit dual strike Brugirl, finishing it all, giving us plenty of room to breathe to take in all the EXP we can in the open area at our own pace. Once we reached the border, we had Fisha and Sol chip out Benny, with Coco getting the exact threshold to kill him, leaving Charlotte vulnerable for attack. And we had to settle this the only way we could. Brogel versus Charlotte, with Brogel getting the kill after Coco successfully chipped her out. I then activate a Dragon Vein to damage every enemy inside the border, giving plenty of EXP for the weaker Corrins, which was a huge help, as at this stage, I needed Kui to promote soon. Because of this, pretty much all the EXP went to Kui, who leveled up near 5 times in this room alone, killing Daniela, ending this chapter in 31 turns. Due to the incredibly high enemy density up ahead in our path, it was decided we were to take a detour into the Wolfskin tribe, a map with high enemy density. We could have completely avoided this conflict, but Yaga decided he was butthurt and caused a ruckus, forcing me to play this map. It was time for me to promote Kui into a Hoshida noble, with the added stats and staff access being incredibly desirable as of this moment. Because of how restricted movement is in Chapter 15, units like Coco and 2-range Corrins were incredibly important to have. Even Brogel contributed, as she had a bolt axe handy. This was also a chapter where I felt I should avoid using Fisha, because I really needed the EXP, which lowered my overall team's ability to be able to handle this map. At a certain point, we get surrounded by Wolfskin and Wolf Segners, barely able to handle the onslaught. Thankfully, I managed to get a Beast Killer for Rasha, so she was able to at least guarantee a kill should she hit any Wolfskin in her path, using her as a dual strike unit whenever I could. Eventually I had to bring Rasha up at the front though, because the enemy density was incredibly high. But I needed to wait one more turn before she could be brought up there. Thankfully, with a Backpack Chris, and Kui's Dragonstone for the magic damage, and Lizard being paired up with Layla for the extra bulk, we were honestly able to handle it just fine. Because Brogel isn't that bulky, she didn't take the front lines, but when she did get into the ring, she goes insane, with her taking heavy damage, missing a Dragon Fang proc, only to then get a crit on 36 hit, securing her victory and allowing her pair-up guard to keep her safe against the next enemy. After several turns of us pretty much doing the same thing, we finally pushed through, climbing up and defeating Keaton with Coco, ending this map in 27 turns. With Chapter 16, Takumi finds himself very sick. After the Corrins discussed perhaps leaving him behind and let nature take its course over this overripened pineapple, we were convinced by Zura that there was a place for him to recover. It was here in Palace Makareth, where we found Flora, immediately followed up by Yago again. I firstly decided to promote Rasha into a Great Knight, as we were severely lacking in bulky units, especially for pair-up support. I also gave Lizard and Depressed a Sting Shuriken, an armor sling weapon which, for a dagger unit, is an incredibly important thing to have, especially given the fact that we, lost that Armor Slayer. After annihilating the armors in the front and Kui securing all the outlaws at the bottom, Lizard went ahead and practically soloed all the mages up above, with Depressed supporting Lizard with the Barb Shuriken, giving me another crit-based Corrin for the team. But because of how long I was taking, one of the outlaws who had an item was about to escape. I tried rushing in, but alas, he was too far gone, escaping with the, arm scroll and 10k gold. It's okay, we have plenty of gold from the other outlaws we killed, but 10k gold is still 10k gold. After moping around losing that 10k, I killed the last few mages, with Coco sealing the deal, ending this chapter in 17 turns. It was after this that I decided to forge my greatest weapon, the Metal Pipe, a +1 forge of the Great Club, making this the perfect weapon for Bra Girl. We then let Flora guide us to the Ice Tribe, being the Chapter 17 map, as she betrays us, due to being threatened by Garrett that he will destroy her tribe, as if he wasn't going to do that already. Every house in this map, with the exception of one, brings in reinforcements, which to me just means EXP with breathing room, and the enemies have item drops. With us promoting Bra Girl into a Berserker, we clear every reinforcements we activate and defeat Flora using a Bro Girl dual strike crit to chip her, and ending it with Coco, sealing this chapter in 32 turns. Despite us being fully willing to spare Flora and welcome her back, yeah, probably should have went Conquest instead for this one. I proceeded to promote Coco into a Wyvern Lord, giving us Lance access and later down the road, Rally Defense, increasing our overall bulk. I then promote Chunki into a Basara for better pair-up support. We then head over to the Woods of Forlorn, where we meet Leo, starting chapter 18. This is a chapter I don't actually know much about because I always skip it, which today will be absolutely no different. We start off by having Niasna use the rescue staff with Coco paired up with Rasha, giving Coco just enough range to switch into Rasha, but as a beast killer, defeating Leo, gaining Luna, an energy drop, and ending this chapter in one turn. After Leo trauma dumps on us, he gives us a teleportation spell that conveniently has us travel to Not Sages to receive power from the Rainbow Sage, which means it's time for the Corrins to have a grand feast of EXP. Before the feast begins, I first promote Kaito into a sniper, increasing his damage output, and I plan on promoting the Mage Twins, Sol and Chris later in the map. Chapter 19, while similar to Conquest's Chapter 11, is made a bit easier given how the map has a stat split. For example, one side has practically crazy defense and low res, and the other side being the other way around, giving us plenty of opportunity to gain EXP fairly safely. I liked all the Corrins to head to the left side, where enemy defense is incredibly low, but res is very high. One of the biggest boons was having Brogirl as a dual strike user for this chapter. Since her crit rate was so high, and getting quadruple damage on crits basically meant even if I myself did no damage, Brogirl would pick up the slack immediately after. With this strategy, along with using Fisha and the Kodachi to draw in the initial crowd of enemies per floor, we eventually clear both left rooms, giving enough EXP to promote Depressed, catching him up with the Dreadfighter Lizard almost immediately. The middle room was done pretty much the same way, with Fisha drawing in the enemies closer, with the rest of the Corrins immediately piling on the leftovers. To avoid wasting much more time, I went to the right side of the room in reverse. Because of how confident I felt, I left Chris vulnerable to gain EXP immediately, thinking I would probably be fine. However, during the enemy phase, I completely forgot to factor that the next enemy up ahead had a different weapon, along with the weapon triangle giving him just enough damage to kill Chris. But Chris dodges an 82% hit and strikes back for the kill, allowing the next turn for her to clear the room and max out her level, landing her to promote into a Dark Knight. Because I didn't actually take a look at the other rooms, I didn't account for the fact that there was an enemy blocking the stairs, which meant I had to go all the way around the left side just to gain a little extra EXP. Given how successful the run was going already, I decided against this and proceeded to head to the final room, with Brogirl and Rasha starting off defeating the pair-up Berserker and Swordmaster together. With a quick pair-up to Rasha to help increase her chances of survival in the enemy phase, I position Embrace for impact on the enemy phase, with Rasha barely surviving the incoming Berserker. Brogirl then leaves just enough damage for the other units to defeat the boss in the room, with Sol finishing him, getting him to level 19. I was mostly content with this, killing everyone else with Lucky Dragon Fang procs along the way. However, turns out this was a Root the Enemy map. And if you remember earlier, there was a room I chose to ignore that I have to go all the way back for. After all that, we ended up with Sol completing this chapter in 36 turns. That was less than I expected, knowing me, not gonna lie. We then get rewarded by the Rainbow Sage, by him spelling out that the real strength he gives us is EXP, not a divine power-up, kind of like Corrin in Dragon Ball. But like Dragon Ball Corrin, the Rainbow Sage gives Kui a divine power-up anyway, with helping us get our Yato to the Noble Yato, which buffs Kui's strength and speed by +2 as long as it is in Kui's inventory, increasing our damage output. We then teleport back, heading northeast into Fort Dragonfall, a fortress made out of a dragon's corpse, where we get Yago, again, complaining about our favorite blue-haired woman with pronouns, then trapping us in a fortress and proceeding to fill the place with stomach acid? Is this the writer's barely disguised fetish? Chapter 20 is a defeat the boss chapter filled to the brim with Faceless. Thankfully, these Faceless aren't scary whatsoever, with them not having Grizzly Wound, which would have made fighting these 10 times harder. And with their really slow stats, making their admittedly other fairly good skills kinda useless. It's also filled with the stomach acid from earlier that deals damage to my Corrins if we stay in there, but we can just drag invade them away easily. We start off with clearing the immediate area, with many of our Corrins getting procs and crits, allowing Sol to get enough EXP to then promote into a Sorcerer. Feeling confident in this run, I decided to split my army into 2 paths, plugging with Chris, using the Horse Spirit at the top, constantly proccing Red Heaven for minimal gain, and Broad Girl covering the bottom, with Rasha covering her back from the reinforcements. It was pretty much GG's from there on, as Broad Girl constantly critted every enemy she hit on every side of the map. Left, right, up, down, it didn't matter. If you were attacking Broad Girl, you were going to face her metal pipe and die. This continued for most of the map, with Rasha eventually covering the top and Broad Girl taking the bottom of this map. And with that, we clear this chapter by killing the boss with Broad Girl, gaining rally strength and ending this chapter in 14 turns, giving us the chance to escape Fort Dragonfall. The Corrin field then decided to take a detour for a massive shortcut to Demon's Fall, the obligatory lava map that I think almost every Fire Emblem game has outside of these. This map's main gimmick otherwise is that you have to activate the Dragon Vein on the correct side, which is whichever side the statue is holding an orb in to progress with a bridge. This can be overcome with a flyer instead, but with only Coco as our flyer, realistically going slow felt like the best option for me. It was mostly Rasha and Fisha handling the front lines, with other Corrins killing whatever was left after the enemy phase with dual strikes and crits, eventually landing right before the final area, where I decided it was best to just go all in and fly in with Coco to have, surprisingly, Saul defeat the boss, beating this chapter in 19 turns. With how middling the mages performed for a while, it was concerning, but these last few chapters, especially after promotion, really proved that my investment in taking care of these Corrins was worth it. After all, any Corrin can cook. Chapter 22 has us surrounded by a man that distinctly looks like a pair of boots. This gave us an opportunity to harvest one more Corrin to the crop. Hanel from Hideout, a strength, defense, boon-bane Sky Knight who we immediately promoted into a Kinchi Knight with Armored Blow, pretty much designing a player face-centric flyer. Because of how this map has us immediately surrounded on all sides, I focus all efforts on the bottom side, so that we can respond to the many units all around us in one general direction. We started with an incredibly bulky Berserker, chipping him down with Broad Girl using a Bolt Axe. Then Chunky came in, trading to switch Broad Girl's weapon from a Bolt Axe into her Metal Pipe, giving her the chance to dual strike crit, giving just enough damage to defeat the Berserker. With Chris getting a lucky skill proc on the other side, Cassie and Hanel together defeated the rest of the bottom right. We had to act fast, as our unit economy was getting lower and lower with each action. Kaito and a dual strike Laylo focused on the mages, with the press getting a Dragon Fang critical hit with the Barb Shuriken against a sorcerer. Misha devastatingly misses an 87% against the maid, but on a second hit he proc Dragon Fang, leaving the maid vulnerable to be killed by really anyone, which Lizard was up for, leaving the upper half including Shura, which he left just enough range for only him to approach. How nice of him. With Fisha drawing Shura in, we defeat Shura with Kui using the Noble Yato. Now that Shura's out of the way, we slowly draw in the enemy X-Fighters using Fisha once again, which might have been overkill as he just killed them, leaving only scraps for the other Corrins. And this loop continued, with Fisha initializing or drawing in the attack, then followed up by the rest of the Corrins immediately after. And with patience, we managed to clear this map with Cassie killing the last enemy in 36 turns. Because I accidentally had Hanel added as a real Corrin, rather than an Einharjar or a recruit unit, with possibly conflicting my castle data with Kui, the game soft locked, making me no longer able to enter my castle. I can't move it. Oh no! Citra crashed! With my last backup save being many chapters behind, there was only really one recourse, which was replaying the chapters as close as possible to what I've done on stream, and eventually, after a few weeks, I managed to catch up back to where we need to defeating Shura once again. After we spare Shura over Boots, he leads us to Nor's Underground, where we stumble across a random Elise, leading us to eventually come across Camilla, who really wants to play with fireworks. Despite us trying to convince her that, I don't know, maybe playing with fireworks underground is a massive hazard to everyone nearby, we still have to deal with Fire Emblem Engage's Divine Paralogue, the Doting Sister. This map is surprisingly a rout the enemy map, with Camilla bombarding us with fireworks pretty much every turn, leaving us vulnerable to take 10 damage each turn were it not for the hallways to take shelter in. Unfortunately, to minimize damage, we had to pair up as many Corrins together to huddle up into short hallways, and with enemies being incredibly powerful, it was painful to throw that much unit economy away. We managed to get Fisha and Kui leading the charge in defense and offense front lines, along with Rasha handling the rear. Each fight was a fight for survival for all the Corrins, leaving many of them with incredibly low health, but eventually, after a few turns, we finally stabilize and proceed forward. With Kui at the top, Rasha in the middle, and Fisha at the bottom hallway, Kui makes many crucial dodges. Rasha tanks anything standing in her way, while dealing incredible damage back with the guard Naginata. And yeah, I think the enemies kinda gave up on Fisha because... I get it. We finally reached beyond the first hallway, which we celebrate by killing Arthur with Fisha in enemy phase. To put insult to injury, we save Effie with Elise talking sense into her, which honestly adds up with Arthur's incredibly bad luck. I mean, leading his enemy AI to attack Fisha of all Corrins. All this ended up with us reaching Camilla, chipping her down with Fisha, then getting an incredibly lucky critical hit from Lizard, defeating Camilla and the rest of the enemies, all in 34 turns. After reprimanding Camilla by teaching her the dangers of using fireworks underground, we only had to advance forward to Castle Krakenberg underground covertly, which we then immediately break the second we enter, leading our mascot Lilith to be killed by Hans. I became so devastated by this that I decided that Hans did not deserve the honor whatsoever to have this map be played. We began chapter 24 by immediately bum rushing to the left side, keeping us barely alive for the enemy phase, and after killing a few key enemies, we positioned ourselves just right for Kui to use her rescue staff to draw Kui, paired up with Broad Girl to ferry her over to Hans, killing him, ending this map in 2 turns. Chapter 25 has Elise guide us to Garens' throne room, where we get interrupted by Yago. Even Elise is tired of this guy, with Takumi immediately going through a major character arc, which is a privilege most other royal siblings don't have. We are now more than prepared to put Takumi back on the bench and begin the map. This chapter is filled to the brim with strong enemies, but there are several choke points to take advantage of. We start with the middle group, then head right, leaving Rasha to basically solo the left side all on her own. The right gets really close, with Broad Girl surviving barely at 2 HP. But eventually we barely had enough unit economy to the point where even Niezna had to get kills in to handle the right side and its reinforcements. With the bottom assured and the sides of the map with its chest secured, Kui dodge tanks the middle room towers to defeat the remainder of the enemies, leaving only Yago's group remaining. This was an extremely clumped group, making simply going all in a really bad idea. So we bait the initial generals with Kui dodging and Rasha tanking. Saul annihilates the generals, and eventually with us slowly approaching, chipping away at the enemies, Chris defeats the Golem, leaving just Yago, a general, and a strategist, which Saul then of course kills. I then panic a little, realizing that this strategist had entrapped. If I didn't kill him this turn, I could potentially get entrapped and be killed by Yago immediately after. So despite missing a crucial critical hit from Depressed, Hanel manages to finish them off using his surefire Yumi, guaranteeing we will be safe for the next turn, giving us the entire army of Corrins to potentially kill Yago. After debating, I decided with Broad Girl giving Rasha rally strength, she would one-shot Yago with her silver Naginata, annihilating Yago without him ever counterattacking, ending this chapter in 54 turns. With Yago slain, we get her path blocked by Xander as the final line of defense, who actually kinda messes Kui up and almost kills her, but Elise trying to use her rescue staff on Kui trips and gets in Xander's line of fire, creating a cutscene that when you try searching it up on YouTube is mostly meme edits, making a tragic scene a comedic one. However, we consider this comedy a tragedy, and we need to avenge our cinnamon roll. So we pushed Kui to proc Astra and double, guaranteeing she kills Xander, ending chapter 26 in 1 turn. With nobody else in the way, only Garen was left to defeat. The Corrins pooled all their strength together and formed the Blazing Yato, which increased the buffs the Noble Yato had by an additional +2. An incredibly useful buff to have, especially when I'm only going to have Kui and Depressed deployed. This was for a couple of reasons. Mainly the fact that the enemies hit so hard, and because this was a few hours into the stream, I did not want to put any more mental energy into this than I already have. So it was up to Kui, paired up with Depressed, to dodge tank the entirety of this chapter, dodging incredibly dangerous hits in every direction. It got to the point where I had to force myself into a corner just to reduce the amount of directions I could get attacked from. Using elixirs, concoctions, vulneraries, and whatever I had in my inventory to heal Kui and keep her alive, she managed to clear just enough to approach Garen's room. I start off with focusing all of my attention on the sorcerer and maid attending Garen, clearing them 1 turn at a time, while making sure I wouldn't get killed by Garen in the enemy phase, as he had Draconic Hex, a skill that would debuff all of my stats by -4. So staying more than one turn with Corrins' range could potentially be run ending. With the Sorcerer and Maid defeated, and me spamming end turn to remove any debuffs I received from Draconic Hex, we start off strong, with Corrin attacking an enemy phase and missing a 20% hit rate thanks to my incredibly high AFO, and Kui dealing a good chunk of damage in exchange. With enemy phase done, and player phase beginning, it was time to finish the job. I missed a crucial 92% hit rate. However, thanks to Duelist Blow and Parap Guard, Corrin couldn't hit me in the first place, and with just enough luck left in me, Kui lands a critical hit, defeating Corrins' first form and activating the final map of the game with Corrin transforming into the Blight Dragon. This map is usually fairly doable regardless of difficulty. However, because I lacked a dancer, I was at a much more severe disadvantage than most other players would be at this point of the game. But of course, Azura enacts her big debuff on the Blight Dragon, giving us an opportunity to strike. Due to me having boots, along with Cassie's +1 movement skill para buff, I was able to immediately target Blight Dragon Corrin, dealing exactly half his HP. But because I could not deal any significant damage to Corrin after this, I had to brace myself and accept the fact that some Corrins are going to die this turn. The first to go was Chris, getting doubled by a general. Next was Niezna, dying to a hero. Depressed dies to a berserker, and Fisha gets killed by a maid. At last, finally falling off at the end of the run. Kui takes a pretty bad hit from the maids, debuffing her, and Rasha barely hangs on with Brogdrol backpacking her, bringing an end to the brutal loss of our Corrins. Saul, angry over the losses of our cornfield, defeated a crucial general that made way for Kui to make one last attack to end all of this. But first, we needed to ensure we could get the kill. So we sent Lizard to go and attack Corrin with a Brass Shuriken for the best hit rate possible. Lizard barely survives at 3 HP, all in exchange for 1 damage, but that 1 damage was going to do us a lot of favors. With Kui landing a desperate crit and getting protected by Cassie's Parap Guard, we barely make it through and defeat Blight Dragon Corrin, ending this Corrinquest Birthright run. Thank you for making it this far. I do Corrinquest fairly often. I've already finished a Conquest Corrinquest run, and I'm currently on a Chat Plays Corrinquest run, which I'm streaming every Wednesday at 1 PM PST. So, if you want to participate and join in on the narrative, hit the like, subscribe, and bell icon to get notified when streams pops up, and of course, expect a video like this for the Conquest run. But regardless, that'll be all for this Corrinquest Birthright video, and I'll see you guys sometime soon. Bye, Pia!